pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, all. First on the agenda is not Mr. Masick, but a reasonable facsimile.
Chris Dunphy with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. I'm here tonight to discuss a couple things. First, what appeared on the agenda was the town of Southampton's community development strategy. And after that discussion, I can then answer a few final questions about the proposed FY 2014 grant application in conjunction with the town of South Hadley. As you may know, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission previously assisted the town of Southampton for a successful FY 2010 Community Development Block Grant application, which provided housing assistance for a number of residents here throughout the community. And prior to that actual successful grant and its completion, we did have several public meetings which developed this community development strategy. Now, the community development strategy is essentially a summary of the community's previous planning efforts. It also outlines some priorities that have been developed by the town in regards to those previous planning efforts. It's a 7-page document. Again, I think this community's, it's a maximum of 7-page, but Southampton's current development strategy is a bit shorter. In the first couple pages, again, outlines some of the previously conducted planning efforts, including you had a community action statement back in 2000, you have an open space and recreation plan, economic development planning effort was done. You also had conducted a build-out analysis, a sub-regional housing plan, and a community development plan. So those are the previous planning efforts that were identified as part of this community development strategy. Then, that effort in preparing this previous community development strategy outlined some future community development efforts. What does the community want to do as they progress into the future? And these things included improvements in your circulation and transportation, improvements in economic development. You want to protect and preserve your historic and cultural resources. Housing was identified as another priority. You're certainly concerned with your land uses around here and how the zoning and land development bylaws might affect those land uses. The preservation of your natural resources was identified, and you continue to express concern with your open space and recreation. And lastly, what was identified as your services and community facilities. So these were some of the issues that were identified previously, and I have to presume that these continue to be some of the priorities of the community. And this whole effort, your previous planning efforts, as well as the development of this community development strategy, ended up in a priority list. Okay, and as you can see, do you folks have copies or? Okay, yeah. All right. So I'll read them for the community at large. These priority projects included number 1, infrastructure and building improvements. And actually, since the development of this, you've gone a long way into resolving some of those priorities with the development of this building here as your municipal office facility. You continue to prioritize recreational opportunities in open space. Economic development was also cited as a priority. Social and community services, and lastly, housing. So those were the 5 projects in general terms that were identified as priorities. And again, I have to presume at this point in time that this community development strategy and the priorities that were outlined in that strategy have not changed. And therefore, we're recommending, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission recommends that this previous community development study again be adopted for use with this proposed 2014 CDBG as the current one. In association with this community development strategy, we had also previously worked to identify a target area for CDBG assistance. And the target area essentially surrounds the primary corridor through Route 10 corridor through the town, and also in and around the lakes over there. And these areas were identified as the target area because it was presumed that's where the greatest need exists for activities that are funded through the Community Development Block Grant, including housing rehabilitation and improvements to your public facilities as two primary things that are handled through the Community Development Block Grant. So the Community Development Strategy, along with the target area, are again being recommended as the, again, the Community Development Strategy is being recommended for adoption as the current Community Development Strategy, as well as the previous target area.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So this grant could also be used for the public safety complex, right?
Not this particular grant, no.
I just read that somewhere.
That is an eligible activity, but it's not being proposed as for this upcoming grant that you're submitting in conjunction with the town of South Hadley.
And who determines the proposals? Was it your decision not to have that? Or
we had, at the previous meeting, I came up here and I explained this, that someone used the term that PVPC is sort of like the marriage broker, and South Hadley had projects readily identified. They were ready to go.
Okay. And
they benefit by bringing another community along. It's a very, very, very competitive application, and you know, it was suggested by our organization that they bring in a second community, and they'll benefit by doing some level of regionalization. And at this stage, the projects that are ready to go include housing rehabilitation and an ADA planning study. Those are the two activities that were identified as a possibility for this upcoming grant with the town of South Hadley. We're not opposed to developing any project with Southampton in the future. We would welcome that challenge, but there's none that jump out as ready to go that would serve this particular type of application at this point in time, other than these two that we've identified.
how do you become a marriage? How do you pick which towns go together?
All right.
I'm just.
Yeah, I know, it's complicated. We went through this before at the last meeting.
Well, never mind that.
No. I can try to explain it if you'd like, but it's a very convoluted, complex grant process that begins and initiates with a community-wide needs score developed by the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development. So the DHCD develops this needs score based on a number of demographic and data information available, including how many low to moderate income persons live in a community, what's the level of poverty. There's like 5 primary demographic elements, and they arrive at a needs score, okay? And if your needs score is like over 25, you belong in this particular class of a classification of communities. That would be, they refer to it as CDF1 communities. If your score is lower than that, you belong in a separate class referred to as CDF2 communities. And that's where Southampton and South Hadley both. And these CDF2 communities are only able to apply every other year.
Okay.
And
so it has nothing to do with South Hadley's environment and its profile and our profile. It's just
it just happens that you're eligible, they're eligible, okay. And we know of other communities that are applying.
That I can't think of, or something. There's no historical.
There's no historical link. No,
okay.
And they don't hold communities to any sort of link in the preparation of these applications either. Yeah. So.
Thank you.
You know, I'm more than able to come up and in depth and work with you guys to describe types of projects that are eligible. If this one's successful, the next time you guys could apply in 2016, and we could discuss a number of different things, as long as they're part of your community development strategy, they're eligible, and they're supported by the community.
Chris, what is the total dollar amount that can be realized on this process?
That can be realized?
Total, yeah.
Well, for these...
Not that it is, I'm just
For
wondering.
these CDF2 communities, there's only $2.5 or $2.7 million available statewide. There'll probably be 8 or 10 8 or 10 applications seeking those limited pool of funds, and only 2 or 3 will be funded.
And what is...
So the maximum allowable through this grant for 2 communities is $900,000. So it can be up to $900,000.
What is our...
I know you're going to ask that. I'm not positive. Regina, did Jim tell you what?
I don't know.
Yeah. I want to say 8 or 900,000, but I'm not positive. And the majority of that has been earmarked for a large project that South Hadley is pursuing, some sort of large public facilities project, and housing rehab for them. The Southampton portion is for housing rehab for this target area, and to conduct this ADA transition plan and planning study. So admittedly, there's a much smaller piece for Southampton this time around. As it happened last time around, Southampton got the larger piece and the other regional applications.
I was going to say, is it fair to say that if the last one, the last grant, we used $734,000, whatever the other community was probably used?
It was actually a 4-town collaborative in the last one, involving let me see, Granville, Blandford, and one other community. Yeah, sorry.
But a much smaller dollar amount, really, is what we're looking at.
This time around,
Yeah.
yes, that would be true. Yeah. But, I will say that the planning study, one completed, will show some sort of background and readiness for future public facility improvements. As I was driving in, I noticed, as an example, you have a beautiful gazebo out there, and it's not accessible, and it really should be in accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And this is something the ADA planning study will look at.
Lions Club can take care of that.
Okay, well,
That's what they donated. They've actually put some money into it recently. That's their donation.
well, the point is any architectural barrier removal project or anything that you want to maybe address in the future, you could not do it through grant funds unless this planning study were conducted. And housing rehab is the larger piece, and we hope to rehab at least another maybe 5 homes in this community. The housing rehab can address septic systems, various code compliant things, electrical, plumbing, roofs, weatherization, lead-based paint issues. So,
Chris, I would think we have a, let me just go back for a second. We have a contract here, I believe, or an agreement at least, that you were looking, I think you're looking to get signed tonight. Here it is.
is that so?
Or is it the old one? That's the old one, I guess.
I'm not aware of, may I see what?
No, it's FY14. Yeah, Reggie, you got?
It's the FY14 community, page 8.
He's
Community
looking for a copy of
development.
it.
Oh, it's in the signature. Should be.
You have it there? Do you have it?
I'm still wondering what Chair is referring to. Oh, okay. So this is not an agreement, it is the community development strategy that we've been talking about. This is the community development strategy that sort of outlines your previous planning efforts and some of your priorities in town. And the idea that this strategy is supposed to be talked about in a public forum and the selectmen agree to it as the current strategy moving forward.
But that would be the next step, is to get signatures on that.
They'll endorse the strategy as the current strategy for the next application, that's correct.
So what we should do is open this to the public at this point in time
Sure.
for commentation.
Is this, Mike, is this stuff based on the master plan stuff?
Certainly, a lot of the planning part of it is going to be.
We certainly extracted the information of the development of this strategy from elements of your master plan. So it doesn't refute anything that you guys have done. It
Doesn't
basically
oppose
supports it, no.
Yeah, it doesn't oppose the
It's
master
supposed to
plan.
enhance it and support it, yeah. But more of a really condensed summary, if you will.
Anybody else on the board with, go ahead.
Chris, in regard to the target area, I'm assuming there's an income mod associated with that target area that can be qualified.
There aren't any specific block groups that specifically align with that target area. It's more of our awareness of the issues in and around the community and where the perceived need is for the types of services that are offered through this
Okay,
grant
I
program.
understand that part, but is there an income requirement?
There is this whole program is predicated on serving low to moderate income individuals. And,
Know those dollars amount?
as an example, if someone was looking to have housing rehabilitation services, current HUD guidelines for a household of one person can earn up to approximately $45,000 a year. And as the number of people in the households increase, so doesn't that income level. I'm speaking approximate terms now. Family of two, 48,000, family of three, 52,000, and so on and so forth, up to family of 8. So if a family meeting those income guidelines, they would qualify for housing assistance. And the housing program can provide what we call a deferred payment loan for up to $35,000. And those funds, like I said, can take care of new septic systems, roofs, any sort of code compliance issues involving electrical, plumbing, weatherization, siding, lead-based paint. And if the homeowner were to stay in the home for 15 years, the loan becomes deferred and it becomes a grant. So the idea is they don't want people to take this assistance for speculation purposes and go ahead and sell it and move on. We want people to remain in their households and improve the character and the existing housing stock within your target area. So a lot of seniors tend to take advantage of it, and folks that just need this type of assistance so they can live in a safe environment in the households.
Chris, if we were to get this grant, unlike the other grant, I'm sure people found out about it, would it be nice to have an easel and a map showing the target area and the minimum requirements and the people to contact for that? Because I don't think we had that in the past.
I will say
I'd like to leave that in the town hall if it becomes reality.
absolutely. We can build a full-scale target area map for it if you like. I will say at this point in time, being we've had a program, a successful program at that, there is actually an existing waiting list for services, for these types of housing services. As a matter of fact, the funds that we're seeking, there's enough people on the waiting list right now that would use those funds that we're applying for. But that's not to say that we should not continue to outreach and let people know, be aware of this program, because perhaps there's an emergency or an extreme priority that develops that might take precedence over other persons.
Well, I'm sure there's criteria to make people with more need than less need, and I would hope that would be part of the justification for selection.
It is. We defer this to Southampton's building inspector and health board. In other words, if there's an issue with a septic and the health board has identified it as in failure, that would elevate as a priority. If a building inspector looks at, say, a leaking roof, and this leaky roof is spilling water all over an electrical box and causing a major health and safety threat, that again would be prioritized. Kind of bummer for those that have been waiting on the list, but it's this program, it's there to help people that need this sort of assistance. Jackie. Hi.
Hi. I had a question. We had discussed getting a traffic light near Opa on Route 10, Palmer Meadow as you come out, and I read some studies that there had been more accidents there, people coming out and trying to get on the 10, because it can be very busy at certain times of the day. And I was just wondering, on the circulation and transportation, would a traffic light be eligible? Would we, to fund something like that? Because I think it's about $250,000. Is that?
I would say it's not eligible for the Community Development Block Grant Program. And in general terms, I think the circulation and transportation, it's covered in here, should the town pursue that with some other source of funds. I would say that you should definitely contact our Pioneer Valley Planning Commission Transportation Division, and if that is a priority for you folks, get it listed on the tip. I also encourage maybe someone from your town goes to the regular tip meetings held by our transportation section to get a project on their list. To get funding through the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. So certainly I would encourage you to, I can convey that if that's a need that you've all agree on, I could certainly convey that to our transportation director, and someone could contact you about how DOT might fund such a project.
Right, thank you.
Okay.
I have one question. The target area, does that mean it's exclusive, that no one outside the target area can apply, or?
For housing rehabilitation, that's essentially correct. We do have a provision that up to 20% of the approved grant amount can be used for emergencies outside the target area. But the program is, it's not our rule, it's a HUD rule, and a DHCD rule, that CDBG funds be targeted into areas that are perceived to have the greatest need. And this is both a federal and a state I wouldn't say statute, but as part of their programmatic requirements that communities target funds to certain areas. Communities that are small, less than 5,000, can actually have a town-wide target area, but we know that's not the case here in Southampton, so they ask us to create a target area, and we try to make it as vast as possible.
Anything from the public? Any questions for Pioneer Valley from the public? On the block grants? Hearing and seeing none, does the board wish to take any action?
Do we need to take action?
I would like the community development strategy endorsed as the actual community development strategy for the FY 2014 CDBG.
I would make a motion to adopt the current community development strategy for the CDBG FY14 grant.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
I think that requires all our signatures.
I would, I don't think that it does. It's up to you guys. I would also ask that the board continue to adopt the target area as outlined as the continued target area for CDBG assistance.
I'll make a motion to...
Well, I didn't realize we had a say in that.
Oh, yes, you do. It's your community. We're working for you. I mean, if the only thing is, if you're going to change it now.
Well, I just want to, if there's some areas that we should be earmarking, I thought this was cast in stone already, but you're saying it's not.
I'm concerned about the stray housing off in the hinterlands that may,
Well, there's houses all over town, but you're saying 20% outside that can be?
for
For
emergency.
emergencies only, right.
I mean, there are pockets of small.
I mean, I will say, sir, that this is
Here, up
your
here,
concern.
Here.
Your concern, it happens to just about every community I go to, and this is not something that the PVPC developed. It's a requirement for this block grant application. It's a DHCD requirement and a HUD requirement. And as I said, we tried to make this as vast as possible, serving the greatest number of people possible that we know of, that there is a definite perceived need for this type of assistance. And this is where most of your public facilities exist. That would be part of your ADA transition plan and ADA study as well. So that's really why the,
I mean, if I could suggest, I take it down to at least Noreen Drive on County Road.
I'm sorry?
Noreen Drive, you see her on County Road?
Little U-shaped street.
I would like to see that extended down here. Okay.
To include this area like
This
that?
little hook right there.
I see.
Or even down to this
I would say,
intersection.
why wouldn't you conclude all of County Road?
Yeah, go right down to this intersection.
That's where all of those.
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
Like that?
Okay, that's,
Sure.
there's a larger number of people that probably could use it.
So if I'm hearing correctly, that the board would endorse a target area that included the map as previously drawn, and also
What we just
extend
put in.
that to include County Road?
Correct.
You're going all the way down to the
To East Street intersection.
East Street intersection.
Okay.
That's a sizable number of smaller homes.
Great. See, that's very valuable information.
Hope it doesn't
So if
change
this
too
were
much your
funded,
paperwork.
residents of that area would be eligible for this assistance as
I
well.
mean, there's no way to, not making a judgment call, but certainly the size homes are, it's the older neighborhoods. I guess that's the way to interpret that. Those are the older neighborhoods,
Yeah.
probably developed in '50s or before.
Sure, so there would be a presumption that these homes would have a need for this type of service.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
And there's several single families down there too.
Oh, great, okay.
Do we need to make a motion?
I would say that you do
All
just
right.
that.
Does everybody understand what we're doing?
Yes.
Changing to include County Roads to the intersection with East Street was the suggestion. Is there a motion to adopt that as the target area?
I make a motion to endorse the target area map as previously drawn and include County Road up to the East Street intersection.
Just to be clear, to include Noreen Drive, because that hooks off of County Road a distance.
To include Noreen Drive.
Okay, we'll redraft it. I'll send it to Regina for you folks to look at, to make sure it's exactly as you intended, but I think I understand your intent here.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We'll give the original to Reggie and make a copy and send it on to you. Send the original on to you, keep a copy here.
That'd be fine, thank you.
Anything further?
I would ask that when prepared, we'll circulate a joint authorization form. It's just a one-page document that the chairman of the Board of Selectmen sign. This simple one-page document is the definitive document that says that the town of Southampton is participating with the town of South Hadley in this FY 2014 grant.
Very good. We'll take care of that when you bring that to our attention.
I'll be emailed or sent. You know, you probably won't, this will be my last visit.
Oh, come on.
You know, then when it's funded, then I'm going to be up here all the time. You're going to want to get rid of me.
Are you taking Jim Mazik's, not Jim Mazik, Jim Gray's old job?
Jim Gray and I were colleagues for many years. Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm taking his job. We do things a little
I
differently.
did a lot of
but-
projects with Jim.
Yeah. I'd say I've done a lot of what Jim Gray has done, and I work a lot out in the towns of Ware and the eastern portion of the Pioneer Valley area. So I've been with the agency for about 14 years now. So if you would have that motion for the approval of the joint authorization form for the FY 2014 grant.
You want that tonight, or we were going to do that when
I
we
mean,
get the form? Why don't we get the...
I'd like you to do it now, so you could just sign it independent of a board meeting.
But I guess my concern would be there, we don't have the language of what it says, so
It just says, it doesn't even say anything. It says joint authorization form, has a line, Southampton, Board of Selectmen, and whoever that is. That's all it says. And all that document does is say, by written signature, that the town of Southampton is participating with the town of South Hadley in this joint application.
What's the board's pleasure on that?
If you want to wait until the next board meeting, that's fine, but you're not going to see anything different than what I just said.
I think we should get it in writing and sign it. I agree with Mike.
Okay.
Writing's always better.
And And we'll do it right away. I mean, we're meeting almost every week now.
You are, okay. All right, not an issue then.
And if time becomes an issue, then let us know.
Our problem is it's a digital grant application, and certain things have to be generated in order to generate this particular form, and it just gets really complicated as we're approaching this deadline, you know.
When is your deadline?
February 14th.
Well, we got time.
We got time. Yeah.
You do, but...
We're meeting.
All right, we'll get that to you guys as soon as possible.
All right. Anything else?
No, other than the announcement that the formal public hearing for this grant will occur on January 21st at 7:15 p.m. at South Hadley Town Hall. And certainly residents of Southampton are encouraged to attend.
Should someone from our board be there, or no?
Should, I mean, I wouldn't say should, but it's encouraged, it's not required. If someone were able to attend and stand up and say, I'm from South Hadley, I support this grant, it would go into the minutes, which would be read by the state.
The only problem we're going to have is that we're going to be meeting.
Yeah, it's usually in conflict, I know that happens a lot. So in recognizing this conflict, I've asked Regina to have you folks prepare perhaps a support letter that could be read into testimony at that meeting for the 21st.
When you produce that document, along with that document, if you'll send something,
I will certainly will.
We'll be glad to
I'll send
do
a draft of that as well as the joint application form.
that would make things much easier. All right?
Lastly, you know, I know a lot of folks didn't hear all of what I talked about, but if we have a sign-in sheet, and it would show the state that people did come out and they heard a little bit about what we talked about. If folks could sign that sheet that's over there at the desk, I'd appreciate it.
All right. We're about to move on to our, is it public safety or Charlie?
Public safety.
Public safety. Charlie Kinnicky and Public Safety
Thanks,
Complex.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Drive safely.
All right, thank you. Right on time.
Yep, definitely use that, because I was told that people like charts and diagrams and lights and figures and everything else, so.
Where are you gonna go?
I'm gonna go behind that chair. You not gonna stand up there with me? Wow. You had such a good start, Bill, I thought.
At least he stays in the front row for you.
That's true.
Every time.
Better,
Yeah.
but I'm not in the front row, so.
Pick it down.
It's getting to the point where we need to have charts.
I don't know, isn't
Okay.
it?
It is.
I just go right to what we're talking about.
We've been trying to give the Board of Selectmen stuff by email so that you guys could watch this continuing thing unfold. This is becoming quite the task, and we're focusing right now on the land. If you recall, about a month ago or so, the Selectmen basically said that we should start looking at other lands because we couldn't make this property work. And what we did is we entertained the idea of why isn't this land workable behind the present fire station? And the reality is it has to do with the septic system. So was there any soils that were suitable? So the Board of Selectmen gave permission for us to use the town backhoe to do a little exploring on William Bray's property, which is adjoining this. And Mr. Bray's property is actually up in here. And Mr. Bray is actually present in the room.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Bray. Thank you
And
for thank you for letting us explore your property.
I was hoping you'd find something really good.
yes, he was very attentive as to what was going on out there.
Who was driving the backhoe?
Todd. So basically, in this area in here, what we discovered is as you go up the higher elevations, the soils changed tremendously. Instead of the clay bases that we have here on the plateau, we ended up into compacted gravels up here. We also saw water table, at least flowing water table, down at 8 feet. This is encouraging us to the point where we think we need to now hire an expert to actually do some perk test soil evaluation. And because of that, we need to, one, ask for permission for the leftover money that we got at town meeting to be used for this. There's about $2,200 there. Looks like it's going to cost us about $1,200 to do the job. We need permission to use the town backhoe again, and we need town services to cut some trees out of the way so we can get the backhoe in there. Now, this is all going to become weather permitting. So to move this project to the next phase, we need your authorization to move this.
Don't we also need Mr. Bray's permission?
He has it. I've given him permission to cut and to go back and do some more exploration.
And I appreciate that, but I think we also need to know whether there's hope of, I'm sure you're not going to let us put our septic system back there with no remuneration. So the question becomes, what are we looking for property, and is Mr. Bray willing to part with it?
If I may.
I guess those are the most direct questions I can ask, because if any one of those fails, there's no sense spending the money.
Once we do a perk test, then we know the soil absorption rate, which means we know the flow rate. We can calculate off of that how large the septic system has to be, and that'll give us a footprint for how much land we need.
Could we take a scientific guess at this point in time and guess the maximum amount and see if Mr. Bray has an issue with that?
An educated guess would be somewhere around, we'll say 200 feet by 200 feet square, given the fact that it is not flat land.
And just being myself, I would ask Mr. Bray if that creates a problem for him if we were to ask to purchase that kind of property.
It does not. Charlie and I have discussed those measurements, and I have that in mind. There are really a number of questions that you need to answer other than just that one.
But
that is, I know, a very important one, because if I said, no, you can't have it,
if you said, no, we can't have it, then we don't want to spend...
You don't want to spend any money on it. No, that is fine. If that can be helpful to keeping the safety complex in this area without having to go look for an entire new piece of property, then that we can discuss that.
We appreciate your cooperation. Does the board have any questions on that issue?
So can I just, if it's suitable for a septic system, where do you build this public safety complex? Right on that line there?
This public safety complex can be built wherever our feasibility study determines that that's a good place for it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The septic system can be pumped to wherever it needs to be. It's not like it has to be 25 feet away from the building or anything like that. This is the leach field, the soil absorption area. So what appears is going to happen is, if I'm looking at this right, this is the present fire station.
Mm-hmm.
That's the present town hall. You're probably looking at the public safety complex in this realm.
So right in the
back of the
field.
fire station.
Yeah.
You know, where the old trucks were parked in the trailer and stuff like that. You're looking in that area. The septic system would be up here, but the reality is you'd have your septic tank and your pump chamber near the building. And then the pump chamber would pump up there. You could literally put a driveway and everything else over all that, and it wouldn't impede anything.
Anybody else questions?
Charlie, any wetlands up there?
Part of the project is to take and determine wetland delineations up there, as well as the perk tests, so that we can figure out, you know, I'm saying 200 feet by 200 feet, it might be 250 feet by 150 feet. There are one snippet of area here that is a swale that comes off this property up here that might end up being part of a wetlands, but we're not sure. The specialist hasn't made a determination because we haven't hired him. But even if that's the case, it may be entirely possible that we replicate it down here when we do the construction. Nothing huge, Ed. If you're asking that way, nothing huge.
Okay.
It's very interesting because if you come off of High Street and go down the hill, it looks wet. but then it plateaus out like it's a gravel knoll. And then it drops down to the town property
I
line.
mean, I know you're aware that we're intercepting a stream at the upper end of our property up there, from that abutting property.
You got one
Right, yeah.
up in here?
No, no,
No,
further
it's
down
You
toward
mean down
Maple
here?
Street.
Yeah, down there.
Yeah, and that's far enough away. Yeah, but Mr. Bray's property is actually, where his house is right here. It's behind his house.
I mean, you're aware there's setbacks and all that to that.
Yeah, we measured about 150 feet away from the top of the hill, from that brook to where we did the hole. So what I tried to do when we did this hole was get them as far away as possible and still be realistic. So we were at least 150 feet away from the brook, and we were still at least 150 feet away from the town property line and 150 feet away from the property line in the back.
Okay.
So
I
that
just
gave
want
us
to make
sort
sure
of-
you're aware there's other things out there.
Oh, I agree.
Anything else, Charlie?
Well, that's the first piece of this, and I'd like to sort of get that by you and see if you're
So you
agreeable
need,
to
you need
it.
us to free up the money for the perk, is that what you're saying?
We have the money in the town vote for the feasibility study. There's still $2,200 in
But
there.
you need an action from us to allow that.
Well, the way the town meeting vote was, it said to, for the committee to move forward, but I would feel more comfortable if it was the selectmen, because you're still the steering committee, you're still in charge of this. I don't want to make this committee in charge of that money.
All right, so I'd make a motion to free up.
I just have a question to Charlie. Charlie, I don't know how the actual vote was taken. Is it, because if it's something that hasn't been developed at town meeting, in the article, I don't think we can spend it, because we ran into that with the cemetery commission years ago when we were doing feasibility studies on cemetery locations. We have to make sure the intent's followed on the question. I don't know what the question says.
But there was something about,
I
doing
have the
soil
article.
testing. I thought.
Bear with me.
And just, this is Mr. Martin on Turkey Hill Field Services, is who you wish to, 'cause we have a letter from Mr. Martin, a engagement of professional services. Is that who you're intending?
Yes. I think I'm looking at the wrong paper.
Just if anybody wants to look at what they're doing, it's page 18 of your, what
To
meeting?
see-
Oh, okay.
Which town meeting?
Is this last annual town meeting we did this?
Was it the annual town meeting?
I don't know. It wasn't that, about a year ago, was it?
Yeah.
Special, wasn't it?
And it's funny, because I'm looking at these.
I just don't want to
Well,
say
I-
okay, and the intent of the article doesn't let us do that,
Can
that's
you,
all.
Reggie, is Eileen still there?
I'm looking it up online.
Oh, okay.
The minutes are online.
Okay.
It's funny, because I pulled it out for tonight's meeting, so I'm sort of going, Bear with me for a minute.
We're looking at this end too, Charlie.
There it is, here, Charlie.
You got it?
So,
Yeah.
here. It's handwritten, but. Is that the one?
That's the one, but that's not what was at town meeting, that was what we wrote.
You want the
I want the actual article.
Town meeting.
What was the date of the town meeting? May.
No, what, the meeting that the article was on, was it annual?
I thought it was Ian.
I think it was the annual.
Well, Charlie,
Yeah,
what we already spent money on was the same intent, right? We used it for perk test.
yeah. We did, it's the
But
same.
the language is restricted to town property or anything like that, right?
No, it was wide open, it said feasibility study for the Public Safety Committee, $10,000. And basically, we were using it for the survey work, the perk test, the
Evaluation.
topographical stuff, and all that. I
I
don't,
just want to make sure we're
She's got
fine
it.
with it.
Article 21, it was made and seconded that the town vote to transfer the sum of $10,000 from free cash to fund the public safety building complex feasibility study.
It's fine with me. I'm fine with that.
So does somebody want to make a motion for the spending of
I'll make a motion to,
$1,100?
to authorize the spending of the remaining money to do off-site feasibility evaluation.
But you're not looking for the remaining money, you're only looking for $1,100, right?
Well, at this point, why don't we just say the remaining money in case something comes up and I don't have to come back here,
Yeah,
okay?
that's fine. Just make sure we got what you want. All right, so the motion is to spend up to the remaining amount of money that's in the account, which is $2,200 by your recollection.
Yeah.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, the next piece of the puzzle. Obviously, these perk tests and everything else have to be done weather pin and permitting. Once they're done and we get a design or a preliminary design of how big this thing needs to be, that's going to give us an idea of how much land we need. I gave everyone a timeline as to what would be the expenses projected out to hire an appraiser to appraise Mr. Bray's property to determine what the value would be on that piece of property. That's something that needs to go to town meeting as an article. And that would be your board to decide if that's what you want to do. We don't need a decision tonight, but we need to make that,
But that's the next logical step.
that's the next logical step. Because once we do that, then the next thing we do is at the same town meeting, we need that money to take and hire an architectural firm.
We got it.
Oh, okay, it's Article 20?
Yep.
This one here? This is the one that she took down from minutes.
What did you, 20?
So it's very,
Yeah.
it's very vague, so it's
Closed it out.
We've already passed it.
We're onward and upward.
all set.
So to catch up a little bit, we need to look at an article at town meeting to hire an appraiser to evaluate Mr. Bray's property, to give us a number as to what we would need to be able to offer him for that piece of property once we calculate out how big it is. That needs to be an article at town meeting. Should be special town meeting so we can keep the process going. The other article we need at town meeting has to do with the feasibility study for the design of this facility. We need to have a preliminary design done. If the I hate to say this way because it sounds like it's, but if our soil stuff goes forward, then the next thing we need to do is hire a company to take and give us preliminary designs for this structure. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000. That's an estimate. So that's an article that needs to be looked at. The next article, which is something I just want to review, is this beautiful piece of property could be yours. It consists of about 12 different parcels with the possibility of being confined into a one parcel for the town of Southampton. But it's going to require an article of town meeting for taking it as an eminent domain and to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. That's still out there. If we move forward with the feasibility studies and everything else, and we need to start looking at grants and everything else, I don't want to stand there and tell everybody, yes, we want a grant, and yes, we have 12 different deeds to our property. It just gets cumbersome.
We talked about that already. What was the cost on that?
We never came back with a cost. All the survey work is done. All the description is done. So it really comes down to town council saying to us, can we just move forward with this and take it by eminent domain? Or is there any other deed searches that need to be done?
Is that something that we can start now?
Yeah, it's
I'm trying to find my
town
chart.
council this minute. But it needs to
Trying
get
to find
started.
my,
That question needs to go to town council to determine if we can just take it by eminent domain. And
Is there a way, Charlie, considering that with the exception of the area that's located, Mr. Bray's property, those are all inhabitants of the town of Southampton, am I right? All those, okay. I'm sure this is not the first time this ever occurred. I'm just wondering, a simple phone call to Copeland and Page, our real estate people, to find out, is there a way of eliminating those lines and make it one, considering we're all one? And I think we need to do that, and find out what that's all about. If we have to go through a whole drawn-out process, then we should hear it and then move on from there.
But it's time now.
It's not the first time. I'm sure the town owns several properties together and then combined them into
No,
one.
we just took the initiative to do this because we knew that if we were gonna start building this complex, we had to have clear lot lines. And that's why we opened up this bag of spaghetti and said, okay, we need to clean this up.
Refresh my memory, Charlie, what was wrong with all the 10 or 12 or whatever number of deeds there were?
Well, some of the deeds basically dead end. They don't say they belong to the town, they don't say they don't belong to the town. Some of the measurements don't match up. You are sitting right now on what is considered to be Maple Street. So Maple Street actually transects through this section of Town Hall, according to the records.
Must have been inconvenient when it
Yeah,
was
but
a
I think
school.
that section of Maple Street was abandoned according to my records.
That's the problem. The
Reverted
rec-
back to the abutters on both sides, which was the town.
That's the problem, though. There doesn't appear to be any records at the Registry of Deeds that clears this up and spells it out. So to make future generations more comfortable when we work on things and when we work on this complex, this would be the way to move, is to basically just clean the record up. I actually agree with Ed. I think once you call up Copeland and Page, they're gonna say, all right, it's all surveyed out, you got all the descriptions, this has been in existence for how many years?
There'll have to be some.
You're gonna be to a title search, though. You're gonna have, that's gonna be the problem, if that's the case, that this isn't a
Well, who's
big,
been paying taxes on it? Nobody.
nobody.
Okay?
But there's gonna have to be, if there's gaps in it, there's gonna
No,
have to be.
I mean, I don't know that much about law, real estate law to say that'll happen, but somebody else out there should know.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's gotta be an easier way than trying to take every single piece of
Well,
property.
the biggest thing,
and
when you used to talk about it, is that this was like, land back here was a park. Remember
Yeah.
that? But it was actually, that deed was actually talking about a piece of property down by the golf course.
Well, Charlie showed me that.
It was really
had-
kinda messed
had
up.
references to different locations.
Yeah.
We probably have to have the Copeland and Page review the ownership and deeds, at least to say that and it would become an issue, I suppose, if we go to borrow money on building.
Or even a strategy, develop a strategy for us, right?
But it only becomes an issue if we're gonna borrow money, because the banks can give me money for something we may.
Well, even a grant would give us a problem with that.
What we're trying to do is clean the record up before we get to the point of, and I gotta be quite candid, Mike, this is the last thing I expected getting on this committee.
No, I know, I wouldn't.
Is I would be.
Charlie, can I ask a simple question? The last property was Miles's property, was that recorded?
Yes.
Okay, so
That
last
was
one was done
recorded.
right.
Miles' property was recorded correctly. We were told it belonged to the Conservation Commission and found out otherwise.
It said it belonged to the fire department.
No, the part that was transferred, because the Albert Miles's property went right through the bathroom in the office. Okay, when they put the addition on.
That's that block.
It was,
right
it was
there.
done
That
so
little
many
block.
years ago.
That was when the town built the fire station on Albert Miles's property.
So I guess what we should do is get all of the deeds from you, and then call Copeland and Page and say how much, or we need to straighten this out, and how much is it gonna cost?
So, if you're going to go for a grant for this
We gotta have it straightened out.
complex, it's got to be clear.
Right.
Because if you get involved in applying for the grant, and then all of a sudden this pops up, it holds it up.
So what, I think the thing to do at this point in time, my suggestion would be to get, Charlie, give us all of the copies of the deeds that you have, along with the sketch,
Reggie has all.
and we'll contact town council and see where we're gonna go.
Well, I mean, just so we don't re-educate Charlie or Charlie re-educates us, when we ask Charlie if he can work with either Reggie or somebody else and communicate this.
Oh, yeah, I have no problem with that. It's just a
Then
scheduling
Is
thing.
that, does the board agree? Wants someone to make a motion that we do that?
Do what?
Have Charlie and Reggie contact town council to discuss correcting all of the deeds that make up the town hall complex, shall we call it?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, a deed search may cost money to do.
Well, that's the conversation.
That should be done by, I think, it doesn't need to be done by the public safety complex.
No,
It
that's
should be done
us.
By the town.
That's us, but
Yeah.
Charlie's going to simply convey all the knowledge he has about the deeds, ask them what we need to do and how much, because we'll have to budget it. We're not going to be able to do it out of this year's budget. You're going to have to budget it into, as I saw the finance committee walk in, you would have to plug in a number to fix out all the deeds for this property. We seem to have some gaps, the whole parcel. And there's some problems with the deeds, or could be some problems with the deeds, and we need to have it looked at by the town council and then correct.
Going on the select board's budget?
Yes.
Well, it's going on.
We gotta put it in the budget.
That's my point, we gotta put it in a budget for next year. We can't fund it out of anything we have this year, because we don't have
The
anything.
highway
It
department?
won't be on the finance committee, but.
No, but
But we'll.
delivering it to the finance committee to process,
Should've come out of my budget.
somebody's gotta do, it's gotta be
It's gotta
done,
be a line item somewhere. Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah, I agree.
So, and we need to have the other odd thing that needs to be done is the motions for town meeting that need to be done if we're gonna proceed with the project.
Yeah, we need to have the motion. Even if we don't proceed with the public safety complex, we still need that motion for the land, just to clean up the records.
That's one issue, but then if the town wants to go ahead with the public safety, then we need a transfer of, or a line item for a budget for your feasibility study and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And
Can
then,
I ask a dumb question? With the ambulance fund, is there any way to take some of the money out of the ambulance fund to fund some of this?
The chief's not here, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, I'm talking in the general direction of the former chief. I'm
maybe
just saying, there is a,
maybe to fund one bay or two bays.
well, I mean, you're talking, you need $40,000 to start developing feasibility and plans and stuff, and I thought maybe that would be a place to get some
I
funding.
don't know how the bid committee feels, I'd be reluctant to stretch it that far to
Well, I
take.
just thought it was an
I
idea.
would too, because that's not the intent.
That's not,
I think you're right, it's not the intent. And that's not a question that either I or Billy can answer, because we don't know what the budget is, how it's being used.
Okay.
and there's, sooner or later, there's gonna be an ambulance needed, we've delayed that for a while now.
One more area. The issue of the present fire station and the fact that it sits in the historical district. I would believe, and I've talked to the committee about this, that the Board of Selectmen may want to approach that committee and ask them if they have any ideas, thoughts, usability, concerns with the old fire station. Because ultimately, if we go forward with this, it is going to be sitting as an island of itself in this complex. And because it is the Historical Commission, I think it's time to start asking them, so we know what to do with this as we incorporate out into this construction.
I thought the building had some issues of structural liability.
It does, and I'm not trying to sidestep this, but this committee was supposed to be working on building a public safety complex. I don't want to get involved in trying to do a structural analysis of a current building in town, especially when the Historical Commission already has designated it to be sort of under them. What's happening is you're chartering this committee to do more things than we're ready to do or skilled to do.
Well, Charlie, won't that come up when they take a look at the traffic patterns and how the vehicle's gonna get out in emergency versus when the town hall's open, when there's a town meeting, they still have to have direct access to the highways. I do think that's gonna be problematic if it stays there.
I agree with what you're saying, but I still think it needs to be that the selectmen ask the Historical Commission to chime in on this as to,
Would the time for that be when if and when the town adopts I think you said $40,000, but the $40,000 for feasibility study, if they kill the feasibility study and don't adopt it,
that's a non-issue.
then it's a non-issue. If they pass the $40,000, then we go to the Historical Society and say, we're going forward with the plans for a building. This may or may not be salvageable. What do you want to do?
It's fine with me, Mike. I'm just pointing out.
No, I'm just saying, would that be the
certain-
logical sequence of doing it?
Why can't we just ask them now?
Well, what
so
if
that
nothing
they
ever-
know that it's a conversation,
Oh, we can do it now, too.
and just ask, what are your thoughts about this, and this is what we're talking about, and
Could they have a say?
here's what could happen, what do you think?
Could they have a say in the construction of the safety complex to incorporate some of the design aspects of the current fire station to sort of hold that over, so that's what the bay's kind of, I know it wouldn't be exact, but sort of that design element to sort of honor the historical nature of the building, but to remove the building.
I think we should just invite him in here and have a simple conversation about it and put it on the radar.
Yeah, so at least they're not waiting, hearing about it in 4
I mean, we
months.
can't do it in the next couple of weeks, but maybe by the end of February or middle of February.
When would you be available? Do you want to be here when we talk to them to explain the process?
It's totally up to your committee what you'd like to do.
I
I'm
think-
just
I think
looking
that
at the
would be
fact that
helpful.
I don't want to be in a situation where they get blindsided
No.
Right.
and
But
go,
I'm just thinking, you've done the most on this, and to have...
I think the former fire chiefs and the current fire chief should be present.
Qualified people that have lived in it for 30 years, so.
And then know
Where you
they
been
know the
living?
building.
where you been living?
In the fire station, Charlie, serving in the fire
Can
station.
you,
I want this as the
can you
record.
coordinate a meeting in February sometime with the historical? We'll ask Reggie to coordinate a meeting with you and the historical and us in sometime in February.
That's fine.
Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Charlie, in regards to your question you had about the backhoe going in, I don't think there'll be a problem with that, but as far as clearing, I don't know how much area you want cleared. I mean, this time of year, we're really restricted.
I appreciate the weather, and I totally agree with you about this. What I want to do is take the engineer out there and have him toe mark some of the trees that need to come down, so then I can take the property owner out there and show him what's being proposed, and then if he gives the nod, have your crew out there, see if it's comfortable, and then do it.
And I just I'd like to see that because there's still a dollar association with that. And
And there's a safety issue too. I mean, you got frozen trees, you start cutting them down, you don't know which way they're gonna snap. I appreciate all that. And it is his property, so I wanna make sure he's comfortable with it and walk it through. But I have no intentions of going out there and trying to help somebody pour water at 0 degrees.
well, you by yourself.
No more.
But the other thing too is, I'm not going to be here much longer than capacity, so I'll pass this on to the new guy, and I'm sure there's not going to be a problem. So.
If you think about where we've been, we're still back here trying to build this where everybody feels they'd like to see it. So I think we're moving along in the right direction. We're just having these little steps that need to be corrected to make it happen.
I'd like to commend you and your committee for a job well done so far.
Strong work, Charlie. Strong work, guys.
Anything else, Charlie?
Not that comes to mind, guys. Anything else?
And I appreciate that, but we'll move along to Charlie. Charlie to Charlie.
Yes. Charlie 1 to Charlie 2.
I'm here to get signature.
Yeah, we're going upstairs.
Come on.
Just go upstairs. Oh, jeez.
Come up here, try a little closer.
Yeah, the land grant fiscal year 18.
Yeah.
As you know, we're negotiating with Pioneer Valley
Those yours?
Railroad, and it's taking a long time. We have an appraised value for the property, $340,000. They would like more.
Payment?
And we're trying to orchestrate an exchange of rails with the Mass DOT. And it's taken time. We've been in contact with Chief Colcott and some representatives of Mass DOT. And we are just waiting at this point. We also have initiated about 2 months ago. So we are making some progress, but at the same time, it's going to take more than that. Because we have to get a purchasing sale and then proceed with the required to get Pioneer Valley Railroad to abandon the property. And that's a federal process, right? Quite extensive. So we managed to get the land grant, and then the Division of Conservation Services to shift eligibility for this land grant to the fiscal year 15. And there is a standard contract, and it is needs to be signed and sent back to the DCS, the Department of Division of Conservation Services. And hopefully it's there somewhere.
Guy, can I just ask a quick question off to the side? When you did the title search, how much did that cost?
The title search is going to cost us $17,500.
Is that based on, how do they base the cost? Just
It was approached with a request for proposals, and the one that was accepted by the select board was based on an individual who did Westfield.
Okay.
So he's experienced. We had a request for proposals, but we had a lot of people volunteering to do it, and they clearly, from their proposals, were not sufficiently skilled, as it were, because these things are 500. This goes to 500 documents. It goes down to back to 1853.
So is it based on the number of properties that abut the railroad that have to be sort of looked at, or is it just?
Yes, and there is a
Okay.
concept
All right.
that the right-of-way that the railroad has is not under the same legal definition of ownership. There's some fee simple. There's some other options that they rented a right-of-way, but they don't actually own it. And this has been going back for 100 years or more, and that has to be sorted through. So the actual fraction of the railroad corridor, the 4.25 miles, that is actually owned by the railroad outright, may not be 100%.
How does that affect, how would that affect, say there was a half-a-mile strip that was just rented and not owned by the railroad, you would have, and the landowner doesn't want the rail trail. How does that affect the rail trail? Is that you have a dead end and a restart?
No. I think
Okay.
the railroad has access and has legal absolute right to these properties over
Okay.
this period of
Okay.
time. But their definition of what that absolute right would be differing.
So some of the places you're not buying the land as much as it's the right of way.
That's right. So we need a signature on that standard document.
Well, I have two documents here. The technical assistance program, and then the standard contract, which is the extension of our...
Okay, the other one, the second document, is related to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission and their District Local Technical Assistance Program. This is a program being developed by them that is developing shared services for local communities. They do it in a number of different functions, but one of which is the Conservation Commission. And East Hampton is very supportive of developing the framework. This is cost-free. We're going to try and figure out how, if it's possible, to have a shared conservation agent between Southampton and East Hampton and maybe another neighboring community. And there is a program that they have set up, and I think they're very supportive of participating in it, just to see what the framework of such a shared conservation agent would be. And that's the second letter.
Didn't we have one before with like Montgomery or something? Weren't we sharing an agent at some point?
Not to my knowledge.
Was Mr. Fisher a shared agent? Wasn't there like one that was a few years back, 5 years
We've
back?
had consultants that help us,
Okay.
but I don't know if there's any municipal shared agent. They have in some of the local communities, like Northampton, a conservation agent. And the complexities of wetland regulations, as well as in our particular case, the stewardship issues associated with our properties are sufficient to consider that we have more help than we have with just volunteers.
And the cost of this position would be through the fees of the Conservation Commission?
That might be, or that has to be worked out in the framework relative to the two towns, how much of this full-time or part-time person would be devoting their energy to the specific town.
So there would be a way maybe to fund this without having to have line?
Maybe,
Okay.
but we
All
can't
right.
really define that till they outline the framework.
So we have we have the contract to extend, and then we have the technical assistance program.
The technical assistance is just a feasibility study to see if it can happen. It's not earmarking us for any
There's no
contractual
fundamental
obligations.
commitment. It is a technical assistance in getting the framework straightened away cost-free.
I have no problem with either one of them.
Do you want to do them separate? Do you want to do separate, or you want to make a motion for both?
Make a motion to approve both.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Thank you.
Yeah, so Reggie, I'll have you give him the originals at some point in time.
Email, which Alexa.
7:35, we have an very brief executive session with Rich Alexak over the UML property. And then have an executive session with Lynn Simmons, and we'll return to regular business at about 8 o'clock, I think, 8:10, thereabouts. So we'd ask, unfortunately, for everyone else to bear with us and come back and see us at around 8:10, 8.
Take a vote.
Oh, yeah. Executive session, David, at your end, all in favor?
McDougal.
Oh, wait a minute, I forgot to read the reading. It's to discuss litigation.
Try to do this.
Under Chapter 30A, Section 21, Number 3, discuss litigation.
McDougal, aye.
Because we're not coming out.
Moulton, aye.
Huh?
You can do independent.
Sue's aye.
I think you got to do it.
Okay,
Come
call
out,
it.
and then go. Beal and I. You need to vote. You need to vote.
Oh, I said aye.
Oh, you can hear.
Maybe
Oh,
I
yeah.
won't, because I can't hear.
All right, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. Yeah.
For 5 minutes, we're coming back.
Well, no, you're off until about 8
Okay.
8 o'clock or 8:10.